Welcome to the Great Canadian Piggy Bank, where we help Canadian parents raise money smart kids. Today's episode is about that exciting and sometimes nerve wracking stage when your teen gets their very first job. It's a milestone that brings paychecks, independence, and of course, some brand new money issues. To help us unpack all of this, I'm joined by Shannon Lee Simmons, a certified financial planner, a best selling author of numerous financial books, and a founder of the award winning New School of Finance. Her latest book, Making Bank Money Skills for Real Life, is written especially for young people. Shannon, thank you so much for joining me. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm so great. Thanks for having me.
Okay, before we dive in, can you tell listeners a bit about why you want to write Making Bank for teens and young adults?
I usually work with adults. That's my 9 to 5 at New School Finance is working with adults with the financial planning side. However, a lot of those adults have teenagers. And something that kept coming up over and over again a few years ago was some of my clients being like, my teenager and I are fighting about money. They don't understand money, and I don't know if I'm teaching them, and I can feel myself passing my financial trauma onto them. Can you sit down with them and just talk to them? So I did a couple of sessions with some of the teenagers of my clients, and very, very quickly, I realized that there's this theme that was coming out and very loudly to me. I'm like, wow, this generation, and I know every generation says this, but it's so different. So different with what they have to face, the economic reality they're facing, the tools that they have. And this is the first generation that from day one, the day they were born, grew up not seeing money physically. How can you ask someone to budget or save or make financial plans when they never even touch money? So I immediately was, I want to know more. I want to do more. I want to get in there. And then I pitched this book, got a book deal for Making Bank. And then I went full out for 2 years working with teenagers across the country in all different walks of life to make sure that I really got a good picture of what was going on. And then as I was writing the book, that's how that all came together.
That's amazing. It hits true for me as well because I have a 13-year-old daughter, and the amount of time she comes to me with $10 in change and goes, "Can you just put $10 into my bank account?" I'm like, "You can pay with the change." She goes, "That is so embarrassing. There is no way I'm going to pay with money."
They think it's embarrassing sometimes. And also, I had one of the teenagers say, well, that's not even real money. And I'm, pardon? Like, what do you mean? Because some places don't even accept cash, and that's real. I don't even think it's snobbery. It's just a lack of experience and literally places taking tap. And if you are trying to buy something online, which most of their purchases are, you can't actually use cash. The financial stakes are so high for this generation, higher than any other generation in the world turning 18. And if they're not getting a chance to learn this stuff before that day, then the damage that can happen is so much exponentially worse than previous generations.
I completely agree. Okay, let's talk about some of these lessons that they need to learn, especially with their first jobs. While this is a very exciting moment of independence for teens, it can be stressful for parents, especially if they watch their kids develop frustrating spending habits. In your book, you talk about building practical money skills early. How can a first job help teens with this?
Yeah, so really, the first thing in any financial plan is to know how much money you have coming in. The first question I asked all of them was, okay, so how much money do you make? Most of the time, because this is a gig economy situation, even if it's a part-time job, it's varying hours, it's an hourly rate that you're not entirely sure what you'll get paid. So tracking your income is the first pillar, and you cannot do that unless you have an income. Right. So I can't even start to set goals for saving or budgeting until we know what the resources that we're working with. So this is number one. And this is why I also am a big fan of allowances, because it's getting harder and harder for this generation to get those sort of elusive part-time jobs. Now they're getting harder to get. There's less of them available. Also, kids are really stressed about school and stressed about programming. And so layering an additional layer can be difficult to find the time, right? To depending on what they've got going on at home. The job or an allowance is a fundamental thing in order to teach financial literacy. And that's because it gives them the opportunity to practice financial literacy. Financial literacy is one thing, practicing is another. And this whole book is geared towards practicing the habits. So that's why that first pillar of tracking your income starts with having an income in the first place, whether it's an allowance or babysitting or an actual part time job. And then after that, once we know what's coming in, then we can start making those plans. So the next thing is to, what are you saving for? This is something that I really found conflicting with parents throughout this whole process. Most of the time, the parents were harping on teens to not spend their money in stupid places and to save because they're young. And this was a constant theme that I heard over and over again from parents. And of course, that makes sense, 100%. But after chatting with the teenagers, we all have it wrong. When you're 15 or 16, it doesn't feel like a reality that you should start saving for the future. That seems so far away. And if you're only earning 40 bucks a week, what's your 5 bucks a week going to do? Plus, this generation knows what's up. They're aware of climate change. They're aware of economic uncertainty. They're like, I don't even know what the world's going to look like. I don't even know. What am I saving for? So that whole motivation to save because you're young is lost. What I'm always saying is, what are we saving for? Take whatever ridiculous thing they want to buy and make it the goal. You want to buy that $100 cream at Sephora? Great. Even though inside you might be dying, great. I'll match that. If you can save that in 3 months, I'll match what your savings are in 3 months. Well, now you've got a teen being like, sweet. I'm going to get the thing I want. How much do I have to save? Okay, so now we're talking. Now we can use the money that they've got. We have a time frame. You have to save this much every week. Cool. Now we've got the goal. Now we've got the motivation, and then we actually start budgeting, right? That is how these steps progress, is about finding the right motivation, because the real goal here for all of us before they're 18 is not what they've saved. It has nothing to do with the dollar amount that they've saved before they're 18. It is about, do they have the habit of money comes in, I put some of it away, I spend some of it, and I know how to live within that amount that I'm allowed to spend. That's the goal. So if you do that by the time you're 18, it doesn't matter if you have $0 in your pocket, you have amassed this life skill that will carry you through and allow you to not get into too much trouble once the smartphones are in your hands and they're connected to credit cards.
So, what I heard there was you should start an allowance with your kid before they get their first job so they can start figuring out spending habits. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying if you can afford to, I would say a $5 allowance is better than no allowance at all, right? So even
Right.
that is something that I would say whatever you could do is good, just to get that flowing. And I think that kids are ready to learn about money in a real way, where they could track and save up for something and spend and start that habit around 10, 11. Before that, yes, you can try, but it's not going to land in the same way. There's not the same like level of understanding. So I think like as soon as we're into grade 6, 7, and 8 and beyond, we're really going for it. And it's hard for those like that. Not all of them can get a babysitting job. Not all of them can cut lawns. Can find that sort of local labor work that can help. So if you're able to do a sort of allowance, is introduction between like effort and pay and consistency. So income with an allowance is one of the most consistent of all the ways that these teens make money. And if you're able to do that in some consistent way, we can almost play with mimicking employer deductions if you're the employer as the parent, right? So I've had parents do this. If the teen gets 25 bucks a week, they withhold 5, they hand them 20, and then they save up that 5 in a different account. And then at the end of the month, they get a bonus. And there's also bonus chores. So I think it's a way to give your teen the opportunity to practice, not about how much money they save. It is about the habit and art of saving and practicing that habit.
Oh my God, I can do a whole episode on allowances. I want to do a whole episode on allowances. I have been, yeah, amazing. Okay. So, what are some first good jobs that teens can offer that can offer both income and valuable life skills?
So any job that gives you money, number one, I think is important one that you can get. Some really creative ways that I saw people making money was, I mean, obviously an ideal situation is if you're old enough, you can get a part-time job somewhere. And the reason I say that is that it just makes your organization a little bit easier than if you're doing it on your own, right? Like that's basically the big benefit of that. And it looks good on a resume. But that's okay if you can't do that. Those are getting, as I said before, few and far between. A lot of those neighborhood work is still very appealing and very needed. Places I saw a lot of money being made, like I'll list some. Babysitting is like the number one place to make some money. And I saw that done in a couple ways, like after school, walking kids home from school, or date night, selling it as a package in their neighborhoods. I thought that was so clever. And they got a whole bunch of families to go out on one night, and then they would all babysit their kids on the same night. And I think just the way that they marketed that made it happen because it was so smart. Dog walking is another one when they're a little bit older, and taking your dog to a dog park. Another one that I saw was clever as well was helping out with kids' birthday parties. So, hey, you got a bunch of 6-year-olds, hire me, I'm 12. I'll wrangle them so that you don't have to. So again, it is babysitting, but it's just done in that more sort of marketing clever way. As much as I hate social media, this is where I find a lot of teens were able to really market themselves in a hyper local way, like your local Facebook group and literally putting things in mailboxes. Obviously, tutoring is another one where people really made a lot of money and consistent. I found tutoring the most consistent, which was awesome. And then many of them have online shops where they make an Etsy store, they make crafts and stuff. The problem with those is that it's so few and far between. It's really just seen as bonus money and not necessarily your consistent income. So, any of those sort of places that teens can make money and come up with ideas. I thought that so many of the teens I talked to were really creative with not what they were offering, but how they were packaging it. I was so impressed.
I'm going to jump ahead about filing taxes then.
Mhm.
Because something that I thought was really interesting when I was reading your book was talking about filing taxes. Um, how old should they be when they start filing taxes? Because like you're talking about babysitting in there, and I was like, oh, I never filed taxes till I got my first T4.
No, filing and paying are two different things, right? So, like, if you don't have to file a tax return if you make under $3,500. Now that's a moving target, so do check that as a disclaimer. Check that every year; it can move. So most people aren't earning more than that, so it's not really an issue. If you get to a situation where you are earning more than that, then you are required to file, but that doesn't mean that you'll pay, right? Because you'd have to earn over the basic personal amount for your province and for like and federally, and so the likelihood of you earning more than twelve to $15,000 in babysitting money also quite low. So it just is an administrative task that needs to happen, but it wouldn't be anything that like would require you to pay anything. And I think it's just good to know that because I did get asked a lot of the time, because what's happening with some of the older teens I was working with, like 15, 16, 17, is they're earning money and they're Googling, what do I do if I'm starting my own business? Well, the first thing that every single blog post is going to say is put money aside for taxes. Well, then start panicking. And they're like, what? Do I have to start doing that? And then it's like a whole thing. So there's a lot of fear around, do I have to? Am I breaking the law? Like what's happening? And that's just, again, one of the problems with Googling is you can come across information that is out of context for you in that specific situation, right? But I do think it's good that it's on their radar.
So, what is the simplest way for teens to start filing for the first time? And the reason I say that is there's some parents who have never filed themselves. They always get an accountant to do it. So, if that's the case, what's the best way for them to file for the first time? And how can parents support them who have never filed themselves?
Yeah, I think up until 18 years old, honestly, I would say just if your family goes to an accountant, the family accountant will be happy to do that. It's not going to be that complicated, right? Like you'll have a T4. But I do think once you're 18, I think everybody should learn how to file their own taxes. I think you should do it for a minimum of 5 years, and then you can go outsource it to someone else. I say that obviously depending on complexity. If you are a person who has a very complex financial situation early on, maybe you need to work with a professional. But typically, young people that I have met with that are between the ages of 18 to 22, they have tuition, they have a T4 maybe. Do you know what I mean? A T4A if they're TAing or something like that, maybe some self-employment income. And I think that that is where you can learn so much about how money works if you do your own taxes. And I would say that the parents, one of two things, sit down with them and figure it out. There are so many great online places to do your taxes now that it's hard to mess it up. Number two, you could even ask your tax preparers, can we sit down with you while you do it, and ask questions. And I think that that might be something that they would offer. But I do think that it is a vital life skill to file your own taxes and to understand fundamentally how money works. And just think that learning that early on is really empowering. It leads to a lot of financial confidence down the road.
That's awesome. And then do you have a recommend of software that they can use for the first time that you find is really simple, knowing that it can get dated really quickly? I got.
They can all get dated. I would say I'm a big fan of UFile. Simple has a good program. TurboTax. They're all pretty good at prompting and helping you work your way through a tax return.
So then let's talk about paychecks the first time, because that's pretty daunting with all the different boxes. So you explain paychecks in really plain language in your book. What should a teen pay attention to on their very first paycheck that they see? And how can parents help with this?
Yeah, I think looking at that pay stub is really important. So, for example, it's like you make $15 an hour. You see that number here, but that is not what goes in your paycheck. And that's a big watershed moment for a lot of young people. It's like, what? But I thought I earned $15 an hour, that I made my whole plan based on that. But there's deductions. So working through these deductions line by line, so they'll probably pay into EI, which is employment insurance. And this whole idea of you put money away so that if you lose your job, then you have a safety net. It's an opportunity I found for a lot of parents as well. I found a lot of values streamed through that conversation. So how a parent presents that talk is very tied politically to where they stand on things and taxes and social programs and social safety nets, which I think that's an opportunity for you to teach your kid the values that you want to instill in them for sure as well, right? Like what's important in this world to you and what you think is important about that. And it'll be right there on the paycheck. And just knowing that like this is a thing that will happen throughout your life, even if you're self-employed. That was a big wake up moment. Okay, you get the $15 an hour if you're self employed. Then it's up to you to put that money aside, which is how so many people end up in like a yucky situation is that they don't, they treat it all as their own. And then they still have to pay these same things that employees had to pay too. So those are just really big learning moments that I think parents can really engage in when that happens.
You've talked to more teens than I have, obviously. So I think they can understand EI. If they lose their job for employment insurance, this is their safety net to help
Yeah.
them. But what about CPP? And so for those who don't know, CPP stands for Canadian Pension Plan. Can you explain that a bit more to them? Because it is so far off for them.
Yeah, and if they're not paying into it, it won't be an issue. But if they're 18, 19, they will be. And I just think it's like a good thing to know about in the first place. So basically, you pay into it, it's for savings. That is the best way to think about it with government matching programs. So you put a little bit of money aside every single year. The employer also puts money aside for you, which I think is a bonus that we don't really think about a lot of the time is that you put the money in and then your employer also matches what you've put aside and pays it to the government that's registered to your social insurance number as your personal contribution. And then it takes your best 40 working years. Okay. So from 18 to 65, it looks at your best 40 working years and says, which that's totally that's 47 years total. So you get 7 years where you don't have to work or you can earn not a lot or whatever. And it says, okay, how many years did you contribute to this program out of that 40 years? And how many years did you contribute the maximum amount that you could pay? And there's a very convoluted algorithm. But long story short, it says, okay, you get this guaranteed for life later on. So what happens when you're either 60, 65, or 70 is that money that you've been contributing your whole working career is tracked with your social insurance number. And the government says, okay, you're going to take it now. And it gives you inflation protected guaranteed income for life till the day you die. And so the idea is that you pay into it now, and then later on, you get to collect it like a pension. So in this world where we have less and less pensions happening for people, the CPP piece, in my personal opinion, becomes very important because often it's the only inflation protected guaranteed income that anybody has, especially as we become more and more self-reliant, self-employed, that kind of thing. So that is what it is. It's guaranteed savings.
Okay, before we get to the end, there's one question, just because you've talked about it a few times, and the fact that you said you didn't like social media is kids are being pummeled with online TikTok finfluencers, how to get rich quickly, all of this stuff. But there's also some really good stuff out there that I've been really impressed with. Like I was just reading in the Globe that 65% of Gen Zs are saving for retirement, which blew my mind. And I think it does have to do with a lot of these finfluencers. I'm shocked how transparent they are with their portfolios. They're showing exactly how much money they're making, how much money they're losing. And so they're demystifying it. What are your thoughts on that? And are there any that you find good that kids should be following besides yourself, of course?
There's so many. I think the good part of social media is people sharing their financial journeys, and that can be really motivating for other people. And in my generation and above, money was still a very taboo subject to talk about. So I was always trying to break that for people. And this generation below, Gen Z, and probably the alphas who are younger, don't seem to be as shy about it because I think they all feel like they're in the same boat and it's not as divisive. So they all talk about it in different ways, which I think is fantastic. And I don't even know if social media has so much to do with that, but I think it's a place that people can share it. I would say a lot of them save for retirement. And I noticed this with some of the older teens I was working with because they just assume that homeownership is not on the docket. So they're just level down because I'll rent for life. And that is a absolutely new trend as well. But Where I think the finfluencers are helpful is when somebody is certified to talk about it. So, number one, parents should follow whoever they're following as far as financial advice goes. I would follow them too. Make sure that they are a qualified person to do that. And I don't even say that from a place of snobbery, because you can have a blogger who's really motivating, but what's motivating becomes advice. And often those who are blogging all become sponsored. That's the whole financial trajectory of it. So once you have a sponsored influencer, now you're talking about financial products, and now there's huge bias. So you go from education to bias. And when that happens on the journey is an interesting place. So paying attention to when it goes from a motivating journey to a sponsored situation, and being aware that you are now just being marketed to for whatever financial products, and the ones that pay big are often credit cards and investment products, right? So just keeping that stuff in mind. Who is paying for this post, I think, is very, very, very important. And so even though someone might be educating, you just always want to be aware of that. Where I think it's problematic, that's getting pitched like this is a great thing, is that scams are rampant. Rampant. And it's like a lot of Bitcoin, crypto scams, this kind of thing. And not necessarily even with Gen Z and young people, with older people too. But I think scams are a big part of it. I also think what I really noticed was the get rich quick attitude. I think that is coming from finfluencers and social media big time, especially like Wall Street bets on Reddit and whatnot. It's the I'm never going to make enough money to do the things I want, so I have to make a lot of money quick. And the only way to do that is to take a hyper amount of risk. And here's where the sharing on social media, I think, is detrimental. Someone posts all their wins, but not all their losses necessarily. And you think, well, that person made $3,000 on one bet. I could do that. That person did. So I really saw that, especially with teenage boys, thinking of investing like gambling. I talk about that a lot in the book. And now there is actually sports betting apps at 18, and they all have access before that through someone's brother, and they are doing it. And so I do find that social media is upping the ante of this and making it seamless for them to do it. There's not a lot of friction. Like, I'm just worried about that. And then the other thing, I'm going on a lot, but I have so much to say about social media. The other thing that I think is harmful for all of us is the algorithm marketing that is happening to you and the contactless payment. You just press a button and you are buying it. You just bought it. Like, it's just there if you have access to a credit card. And so that's why at 18, you can get into frictionless payment trouble and an algorithm that's marketing to you. Now, every time you open your phone, it's going to be right there. It's waiting for you at your weakest moment.
I totally agree. I mean,
that's part of that grow your money, enjoy your money parts of the book, is like, there's nothing wrong with getting the dopamine hit from your money and doing the thing that feels kind of irresponsible, as long as it is done in a way that's not actually going to harm you. So with anyone who's crypto curious, go do it. Buy an amount of money in whatever you want to do, that if it goes to zero, you're fine, right? Like that. Go buy the stock that you believe in. Totally. As long as you do it in an amount of money that if it goes to zero, you're fine. Like, I'm never don't do that. I'm like, do it responsibly. Right? A harm reduction for financial gambling. Like, you know what I mean? Like, let's do it responsibly so that you can enjoy.
Okay. So to wrap up then. So for parents listening, if they wanted 3 practical things that they can do with their teen after that first paycheck, what would you suggest?
Number one, I mean, this is so biased, but I would read the book together as a family so that you have a common language that's telling you how to do this. Number two, I would map out how to track their income, which again is that first module of the book, so that they know what they can count on for a set amount of time. It is so powerful to know, and then set a goal with them that is very motivating for them and help them get there. So be on their side, trying to save for it. And just remember, when you are biting your tongue till it bleeds, because the thing that they are going to save for is making you so mad, that if they are practicing the art of saving and like delayed gratification and not spending everything, then you are winning. That is the win. That is great. So who cares what they end up spending it all on?
Okay, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Shannon.
Oh, my pleasure.
Is there anything final you want to say to the listeners out there?
I feel we talked about so many things. The kids are all right. They're going to be okay. This was such a savvy group of teens across the board. I feel like they'll know so much more than I'll ever know. They are living in a world where it is going so fast. So as long as we just give them that opportunity to practice it so that they're prepared, I think we've done our job.
Oh my God, that makes me feel so much better. Thanks, Shannon. Thank you so much for joining us today. From this episode, I think my takeaways are I'm going to make sure that my kid has a motivating goal that she can save towards and practice delayed gratification. I'm definitely also going to explain the taxes like CPP and EI on her paycheck. And one of the big things that I'll also do, which kind of does my head in because TikTok is not my favorite platform, is follow any finfluencers that she's following and make sure that she really understands which ones are motivational and which ones just have marketing sponsored content. I've already ruined unboxing videos for her when she was 8 years old, so this will just continue this disappointing lesson in life. If you like today's episode, please subscribe and share it with other parents and let me know what other topics you'd love to hear about. I'm Christy Ray, and this is the Great Canadian Piggy Bank, helping Canadian parents raise money smart kids.